Has globalization run out of gas? Coming out of a recession, going into big election campaigns on both sides of the Atlantic, the popular term to describe the mood is insurgent. Here in France, a year before voters pick a new president, it's unions and students revolting against labor reform. What kind of job security, what kind of job can we realistically expect in an era where the rules of doing business are constantly being rewritten? France has nearly 11% unemployment. That's nearly double the rate in the United States, yet insurgent candidates there are rattling the form in the race to the White House. Why have Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders struck a chord? Does their rise, does the Brexit referendum, the rise of nationalists in Europe, does it signal the end of free trade as we know it, as we've known it really since the Second World War? More broadly, do the voters who are backing insurgents have a future in the workplace and a place in this brave new digital world? Welcome to a special edition of the France 24 debate in partnership with the OECD Week. It brings together policymakers, players and thinkers from across the industrialized world. With us to talk about our disrupted economy, Stefano Scarpetta, Director for Employment and Labor and Social Affairs at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, based here in Paris. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
From Brussels comes Luca Vicentini, General Secretary of the European Union of Trade Confederations. How many members would you say are in that umbrella group?
45 million members.
45
and 90 national organizations, as affiliates.
All right, so a lot of union members. Will be asking you how the union movement is doing in the current context. Also with us, Tuuli Kaskinen, Executive Director of Nordic think tank Demos Helsinki. In a word, Demos Helsinki, tell us about it.
It's a think tank that has the opportunity to have a bit wider look at. We don't have members and we don't have donors in a way. So our role is to have a look at where the future is going and what's the role of companies and organizations in that. Companies
and organizations bring them together with people who are, again, their job descriptions are constantly being rewritten, and it's something that we'll be talking about.
Exactly.
Also in the company of Jason Karayan, Senior Europe Correspondent for the news website Quartz. Thank you for being with us. You're the author of The Chief Financial Officer. You've been moderating panels here. The France 24 debate, where you could join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Our panelists have no doubt noticed there's a transport strike on in the French capital, a fuel depot strike on Friday, an air traffic controllers strike, a mix of trade unions and students picketing a labor reform bill that's on the table. These images are of the blockade in the northwestern city of Rouen by students from the Nuit Debout movement, Up All Night, if you will, is the name of that movement. And it's a bit of a mixed bag, Luca Vicentini, in this country, because on the one hand, you have trade unions defending job security and students who critics say will never be able to get those kinds of jobs backing them.
Yeah, sure. But, it's a fake alternative because the same reason why we are defending jobs rights and labor rights of the people that have a job and would like to retain it and also to have possibly better conditions or at least to save their rights. At the same time, we have also to struggle to ensure that the people that are outside the labor market for the moment or that are in the labor market in a precarious condition can get the same rights. So the problem is not to destroy the existing rights. The problem is to extend the rights.
But the argument is that the labor market's too rigid and that nobody wants to hire in a place like France if it's too rigid.
Are we sure? We have faced in the last 5 years, especially in Europe, I think 20, 30, 40 different structural labor market reforms to introduce more flexibility, let's say, and liberalization in the labor market. So are we really sure this is the problem of our labor market? Or the problem is the fact that the European economy is yet not able to create new jobs and quality jobs? We think the second problem is the real one, not the first.
Tuuli Kaskinen, you agree?
Mm-hmm. I think it's both. Europe has not been able to produce things that other parts of the world would really want, like the productivity in that sense has been going down. Then at the same time, as we know, the micro-tasking and little pieces of work are able to be shared in a fully new way that means that also the question of who is paid and how, on which stages, and how people are able to create meaningfulness for their life on top of probably working, because not all of us do have the work. That they are all big questions.
All big questions, but coming from Northern Europe, when you see the strikes in France, tell us truthfully, what do you think?
Of course, it's a bit surprising because in Europe we have been living those times when we didn't have that much movement on those things. But then at the same time, I think we are living in a time which we could somehow refer to probably times 100 years ago, when there was really huge change in our economy. And in a way, people were working, people were moving from the cities, from countryside to cities, and all of that was happening. And same kind of things are happening at the moment. And it's quite natural that people feel that we are not okay with this. We don't know who will pay our bills in next month.
So, Stefano Scarpetta, I'm glad you're here because you're going to brief us on what the water cooler chatter is at the OECD about all of this. Because you have members, how many countries in the OECD?
35 almost.
30.
Latvia joining the OECD.
And some of them are very liberal, and some of them are quite statist in their economies. So is there a consensus on these French strikes, for instance?
I don't think there is consensus, but I think there is a lot that can be learned from each country, including some of the countries that have implemented important reforms. Especially in Europe, but not only in Europe, there is a lot of concerns. I mean, the unemployment rate in France is just slightly declining and has increased a lot. In other European countries, unemployment has increased a lot. For youth, unemployment is extremely high. So
but you heard Luca, he said, come on, we've had loads of labor reforms, including under this government. Why do we need more? The problem isn't, you don't need to make the labor market more flexible.
I think it depends on the countries. I think look at some of the countries which have implemented some labor reforms. Spain, Portugal, even Italy. These are countries that went in a very difficult situation and yet managed to some extent to improve not only the performance in terms of economic growth, but also not the number of jobs, but also the quality of the jobs. The Spanish reform was implemented in 2012, right, at the time of a recession. And yet, when the economy was still in recession in 2013, they started creating more permanent, stable jobs. The question is not just the number of jobs, but also the quality of the jobs. In many European countries, the problem is that many people, not only young people, many actually have only precarious, temporary jobs, leading from one job, unemployment, another job, and no way to build a career, to actually use fully the human capital. But let's face it, this is not just an issue for the labor reforms. It's an issue about reforms to promote economic growth. And at the same time, we see all these structural changes. I mean, the digitalization of the economy is also affecting our labor markets in a way that requires specific responses beyond the labor reform itself.
All right, there's the latest figures on French unemployment. They say it's 10.2. It might be a little bit higher according to how you measure it. 10.2, by the way, is the number that put out this Tuesday across the Eurozone. That number is flat. That's a lot of unemployed people.
It's a lot. When you look at the youth unemployment, it's much higher than that, of course. You're talking about 25%. In Spain, despite the fact that unemployment has been declined, you got more than 40% of the youth who are unemployed. So there is an issue, and we need growth, we need job creation, but also, frankly, we need to have labor reform that improve the quality of the job our economies are creating.
Jason Crime, when you speak to your editors in New York, do they look down at Europeans? Because what is it? The unemployment figure theirs are near 5%.
Yeah. Well, and even where I am in the UK, and still you see around, like you mentioned, around Brexit, the debate on that, and then you see the rise of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, there's this kind of populist anger. And I think a lot of that speaks to some of the structural changes you were talking about, the digitalization of the economies. There's this jobless recovery that's happening. GDP may be going up, unemployment rate may be going down, but when you scratch beneath the surface, there's people out there who think they should have better jobs. The quality of their jobs should be better. We have these giant companies, just Apple, Airbnb, all these kind of upstart and even not so upstart digital technology companies that don't employ a lot of people and yet create a lot of value. And that creates problems for people who want those quality jobs, particularly young people.
Jason, you moderated a panel today called Digital and Robotic Market. Digital and
Yeah. Well, it was about the future of work. And I was helped introducing.
It doesn't
the panel
sound like there are any workers in
by
that
a robot.
future.
Well, so the first person who spoke on that panel was a robot who was there. He sort of she, I don't know, introduced me. I talked to it a little bit. It went back. It had some more interjections there. And that's throughout the day today at the OECD forum, there was robots kind of whizzing in and out, talking to people, shaking their hands. I saw some people hugging them. This is happening now, and they are increasingly doing more of the kind of non-routine cognitive tasks that we thought previously were sacrosanct, were for humans.
So what's going to happen to the humans?
Yeah. So what the robotics makers will tell you is that they aren't necessarily robots taking your jobs, but they are cobots who you are there to collaborate with. They're taking away the mundane, routine tasks and making your job better, more fulfilling, more meaningful. That's the kind of their marketing pitch, obviously. And they do have some ground to say that because the companies that are actually making the robots are growing incredibly fast. They're creating all those jobs. Those jobs do require a different set of skills than maybe traditional machinists would have, or people who work in kind of traditional manufacturing.
So what you're suggesting is there's plenty of jobs out there. It's just that we need skilled labor for specific things.
Yeah, I think you need to kind of retool the skills of the labor market to meet these new realities. And I know this is something that Stefano has definitely been looking into.
Have you done the math on this, Luca Vicentini? If we just had better training, the unemployment problem would be solved?
Well, we had this propaganda going on for years and years that we can really improve the situation in the economy and get better jobs and more jobs, quality jobs, through education and training and labor market reforms. But despite of the efforts that we really appreciate, also what Stefano was referring to in some countries like Spain, Italy and others, well, the number of available jobs in Europe has not improved significantly, and the level of youth unemployment is still the same as 2 or 3 years ago. So the point is that all these measures, even if they are neutral or positive or negative, it depends, we can have different assessment about that, but these are soft measures, improving the skills of the people, improving the education systems, improving the labor market functioning. Everything is really important, but we should stop lying to the young people. Because if we simply continue repeating to them, you have to be more flexible, you have to improve your skills, you have to improve your competences, and then nothing happens because they cannot get a good job in their reality, well, we should ask ourselves if there is another way to get to the result we are working for. And in this respect, the only way to get there is to change the macroeconomic policy that Europe put in place in the last years. And this policy was wrong, simply, because it didn't produce any result. So we have to think about other factors that can really influence the situation, not instead of education, training, labor market reforms. These two are fundamental. But first of all, what about investment in the economy? What about the capacity to change completely the course of the macroeconomic austerity we have put in place in the last years? What about investing in demand that is, at the moment, is completely lacking? We have faced in the last years an incredible drop in public and private investment in Europe everywhere, and we have faced an incredible drop in internal demand in the European economy. But we should bear in mind that 60-70% of our products stay in Europe, go to European consumers. How can we recover this situation without investment and without investing on demand? Without that, it's impossible. We are simply lying to the people, and we are continuing.
When you say investment, do you mean public investment or private investment?
I mean both. There is no private investment, despite of the fact that we had incredibly high level of profits in the last years.
But they dropped the interest rates to get people to invest more money.
This is not public investment. Private investment alone doesn't work. Public investment alone is really bureaucratic, and it doesn't work. Public and private investment together can really make the difference. But at the moment, we don't have both of them, unfortunately. We don't have private investment because it's dropped. It collapsed completely in the last years in Europe. And on the other side, despite of the fact that very big profits have been made and they went to the pockets of someone or maybe to the speculation in the financial markets. And on the other side, also public investment is completely frozen because of the austerity measures, the budget constraints, etc. So we have to reactivate both these tools if we want really to boost the economy.
Tuli Gaskin, in your native land, Finland, ahead of the curve. You were the first to embrace the digital economy.
With Nokia. And then it didn't go that well, as you all know.
Did you see this coming, that we'd be here in 2016 talking in this way?
Of course, I think no one saw it in this way, but I think there is something to add on what we should not lie. Because if we are lying on the fact that there will be work for everyone in the future, I think might also be not the truth. So I think we should also help the young people to find ways to cover part of their costs by working, part of their costs doing something else, probably part of their costs through basic income on that kind of solutions. Because it doesn't look like that we are going to a world where everyone would have 100% ability to work like full time and full day. So that's.
And yet we
that's
have this
another-
aging continent where people are getting older. I read
But
this
it's
morning that
those
in
robots.
Eastern Europe the population's going down.
But it's the robots, and it's not robots, but it's also code and artificial intelligence that will do part of our work. Like what we know about, let's say, Flickr, a photo sharing system, and Kodak. If you compare these two companies and their value in the market is pretty much the same. Kodak used to have hundreds of thousands of people working there. In Flickr, there are not that many. So the value doesn't come that much from the people as it used to in the service sector. And then the question is like, who owns then these companies and who gets the value out of them? Is it those who have had their workplace there, or should we have some other ways to share this value, like basic income, or some other ways to share the value for all the people, for people to be able to consume? Because of course that's what
It
needs to be
requires
done.
a lot of public investment, to do that.
Yeah, it requires part of that, but that's the thing, of course.
Stefano Scarpetta, this notion, do we have to rethink maybe the way we see value? Just as I know some people say we should rethink the way we see growth, that we should stop trying to get people to buy stuff they don't need.
I think absolutely. I think we really have to embrace this concept in which we promote economic growth, and we know we need a lot of growth. We are very weak growth, but also make sure this process of growth is as far as possible inclusive. So we bring people to participate in this process of economic growth. What I think we have to be careful of is to say, now there is one policy and only one policy we have to promote. I think I fully agree. We have very weak economic growth, very weak investment. These need intervention. Those countries who have the fiscal space have to use it. We need a combination of public and private investment, but there's no question about that. At the same time, let's not wait for investing the skills of the young people who are entering the labor market, maybe not having the right skill to find a suitable job in the market, but also invest in the skill of those who are already into the labor market and whose job may be at risk, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe in 5 years' time.
Jason, did you come out of your panel today heartened or disheartened?
Yeah, it was mixed. But to that last point, one thing that most of the panel was definitely in agreement is that the answer to everything, to me, seemed to be more STEM education: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. That seems to be the answer always now. But what I wonder is, if you're a young person and you're not interested in coding, in maths, in technology, it sounds fairly bleak, actually. And that was definitely, maybe just because my panel was very sort of robotics focused, but that was definitely the kind of impression that I got. And for those people, I wonder what kind of safety net we have for them if so much of the new economy, the fourth industrial revolution, the second machine age, whatever, is so technology focused.
All right, so one answer being technological, partially unsatisfying for Jason. We're going to hear what the answer is from politicians when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.